you tonight on a technique you may or may not be familiar with. If you haven't met me before, my name is Carrie, and I'm owner at Classic Cottage Art and Antiques, and I'm in Bowling Green, Virginia. And I love to teach people to paint beautiful furniture, to make beautiful jewelry, and to make beautiful home decor items. So this can be used, the project we're going to work on tonight can be either home decor or furniture. Either one will work on, or craft projects too. So if you've watched my cabinet painting video, you'll remember that I had this really cool hardware. And this whole project started because I wanted to make a shelf that kind of matched the hardware. Strange, but that's what I wanted to do. So this is my shelf. You can see it back here. It's like this. It's a little bit of trim and a piece of wood. Actually, this is a piece of recycled wood. It was a dining room leaf part of it, and we cut it down to make another table. We had leftovers, and I always like to use leftovers to make things. So my husband made me this. If you have I don't know if you can see it close, a miter saw, you can do this. It's basically, and I'll show you on this, and then I'll get to the technique in a minute, but just to kind of give you a little quick technique. Take some trim, take a board however long you want it, and it's not the right size board, but you can put them together like this and make a really cute shelf. To hang it on the wall is really cool because it's more like a floating shelf. Notice I have holes, oops, somewhere, there you go, the holes here. They correspond to the holes in this piece. This piece attaches to your wall. This sits on the wall like so. You screw this shelf down from the top and you've got a kind of a hanging wall shelf. So you've got kind of a hanging wall shelf that doesn't look like you've got brackets. So that's pretty cool. But what I'm here for is to teach you the technique that you may or may not already know. We're going to talk about distressing tonight. This is not only a shelf, it's also going to be a towel rack. So I'm going to hang towel brackets here and put the bar, and it'll be a cute little towel rack as well as a shelf. Okay. Recycled stuff, I had that laying around, so there you go, recycle things. So what we're going to do tonight, I'm going to teach you how I like to distress items. There's three different ways. This is a traditional way that I have distressed. I don't know if you can see it along the edges. If you can't see it, trust me, it's there. Camera, there you go. Kind of like right in here where you can see the wood. That's what I call traditional distressing with sandpaper, which is how I usually distress if I'm doing furniture that I want the wood to show through. If I want the wood to show through, I kind of like to do it with sandpaper. Sandpaper is kind of messy, just saying. And if you want to do it indoors, it throws dust and stuff everywhere. But I've got a couple of other different ways I want to show you that are not as messy, but have an equally good result, I guess. Now this is not the greatest, this is just to show you. But this is all distressed. Where'd my other one go? I like this way too. A little more subtle distressing. I've also got this handy dandy little flower pot. Probably not the style anymore, but I was just playing around with the technique, and there you go. So, in order to distress, I mentioned sandpaper was one way to distress, like I did the table back here. That's one way. It's kind of messy. You can also use petroleum jelly, a candle, and I actually even tried it with the Dixie Belle wax, and that wasn't as successful, but it worked. So let me show you what I'm talking about. I like to do this, as a matter of fact. Let me show you the sandpaper method. It's going to be kind of loud. This has already been distressed just from sitting around. This was painted, I don't even know how long ago, but if I wanted to distress this with sandpaper, hold your ears, sorry. I'm just going to do this around the edges. And it's leaving a really big mess, as you can tell. But that's not the most beautiful distressing, but just to kind of give you the idea, this is probably a little bit rough for this. I would probably use 220 sandpaper. All I had in the shop today was 120, so that's kind of, but you could get a more subtle, there you go, a more subtle look with a sanding block. But you'll also notice it left a giant mess on my table. So if you're going to do a lot of that indoors, it's kind of a pain. I like to use the, I just call it the wet method, I guess. And I'm going to use a really contrasting color here. I'm going to do it a couple different ways. This is Dixie Belle Peacock, and it's had like glaze and stuff put all over it already anyways. But we're going to try something else tonight. First of all, I'm going to put some petroleum jelly where I think I want the distressing to be. So it doesn't take a whole lot. Let's go maybe right here. Okay, now the trick with this is you got to remember where you put it pretty much. Maybe, I'm going to leave them all on the same side so I can find what in the world where they're at. All right, that's probably overkill, but you don't need a whole lot of the petroleum jelly, otherwise it goes everywhere. But that's to start with. Now, you can also do this with an old candle. I'm going to do that here. What we're doing is we're leaving, I guess you would call it a resist, so that the paint doesn't stick to this and it distresses where you want it. Okay, you can do that too. I'm not going to bother to do it with the Dixie Belle wax because it's similar to the actual candle. Okay, so then what you do after that, let me back up 1 second. First of all, you're going to need to paint a base coat, okay? So you paint a base coat. I like to do it with darker colors underneath. I like to paint a base coat and let it dry. Now the reason you want to let it dry, and I like to let it dry overnight if I can, because it won't reactivate the paint when we go do the next step. Okay, but if you can, let it dry overnight, if not a couple of hours, or get it super dry with a heat gun if you can. Okay, and I'm going to use Rusty Nail as my top coat here. So remember, we put the petroleum jelly here. You can still see it kind of shiny, and the wax right here. And I'm just going to paint over it. Sometimes I'll do 2 coats of paint over it, not always. Now over here, I'm going to paint a little bit further down here. Lost my paint. I'm going to paint a little bit further down where we didn't put either of those and show you even another technique of how to distress. It leaves kind of a, each one has a little different result. And I'm just putting it on. I don't really have a lot of water on my brush. I kind of have it mostly dry. All right, so now, sorry, but I'm going to have to use the hairdryer on this one again. So I really want to get this pretty dry, but I don't want to get it so dry that I can't wipe it back. Okay. This is mostly dry, but it should work for our purposes. Now I'm going to take, in this case, the first place that we put petroleum jelly over was over here. So I'm going to, it's not quite 100% dry yet, but where we put the jelly, it should be fine. You can see what I'm doing. Now, Dixie Belle paint is not cured at this point, but you see where it popped through? And even down here, get it. Sometimes you have to use a little bit of muscle, and sometimes it's good to use a wet, damp rag for this. So wherever I have placed the petroleum jelly, it acted as a resist and the paint didn't stick. There you go, mostly right here. You see I'm rubbing right here and it's not coming off. But here where I put the petroleum jelly, it's coming off. Get down here. All right. So now, up here I have used the candle as a resist, and I'm going to do the same thing. It's got the same properties. Sometimes, see how it comes out a little bit differently? The petroleum jelly is kind of smoother, and this is a little more jagged. Where else did I put the candle? There it is. And I'm rubbing this with a dry rag. And you can kind of see, and this is, you would do a better job than this, obviously, because I'm doing this as a quick demo. But there's another way, okay? So we got the petroleum jelly that we placed here as a resist, in here. We used a candle here and here. So my favorite way, though, to distress is with a wet rag. before the paint sets up. Basically all I'm going to do is, I'm going to do it right in the middle. I can wipe it back just like that. And I can wipe it anywhere I think that natural distressing would occur. This is a method, all three of these methods here are actually, they're not that messy. So like with the sanding we did at the beginning, the sanding is a real mess. But with doing it with the rag, the wet rag, the petroleum jelly, which is a little bit messy, not too bad, or the candle wax, you can see you get similar but not quite the same techniques. On here, on this pumpkin, I did the opposite colorway. This is antebellum blue. This is buttercream. Now this may, because I didn't let it sit overnight, this may actually make a big mess. On something like this, because it's plastic and I did not use slick stick, I want to be a little more careful. And this is set for several hours today. Okay, this is a good how-to. This set for several hours today, and so it's stuck more to the paint underneath of it. So you want to do particularly this step here with the rag. You want to do this before the paint sets up real well. And you can see it's not coming off. So this paint is set up really, really well, so it's not going to distress well for me right now. So here's another little sample I did on I was just playing around just to see colorways. And my flower pot up here also, same kind of thing. This is a case of where I painted Colonel Mustard here, and I painted Rusty Nail over top, and I used my wet rag to go through wherever I thought that I wanted to distress. The cool thing is you don't have to distress and just, whoops, where'd it go, in a straight line. You can go sideways or diagonally, and you can get whatever look you want. So that's kind of a cute look. It was kind of cool today. I didn't know if it was going to work or not, but you might can see, this was a patina piece I had done probably last year, and it's been sitting and it's been clear coated for some time. But I also, if you can see, I painted antebellum blue, and then I did the rag technique, and I distressed, oops, there it is. I distressed using the rag technique so that it looks kind of cool to have the dark on the dark. Or you can do, now that's kind of overkill just to kind of show you that it would do that. But, where did my other one go? I kind of like this one too, where it's just very subtle. So, basically, paint a base coat down of the color that you want to show through your distressing. And just a tip too, this is Dixie Belle Buttercream over this really dark Dixie Belle Antebellum Blue. And it only took 2 coats to cover the blue, so that's really good coverage for Dixie Belle. But basically all I did was, and now because this paint has set up like several hours, you want to catch it before it's set up that deep, because I can't wipe the paint off now to distress it without pulling all of the paint off. Let me show you again. What I could do though is I could do probably the petroleum jelly method. I'm going to do it right in here. And because this way only this color will show through when I wipe it back. So like on plastic, I think I would probably use the petroleum jelly method versus just the wet rag method, just because. As a matter of fact, let's do this with buttercream as well. Pardon my arm, y'all. Where did it go? Okay. Make sure I actually paint over that. See how easy it is just to paint right over that? And if you'll notice, this is a little bit darker. This is also buttercream, but I also used, Van Dyke Brown glaze on it. Guess what I did? I painted the wrong color because I was running my mouth. No problem. It might have pink now, but I'm going to go back over it. If you like pink pumpkins, that'd be kind of cool. But But again, I'm just going back over, and then it'll show the color underneath. Now let's see what this does. It might turn out terrible, and it might turn out great. Just remember, if you're going to dry a plastic pumpkin, don't use a heat gun. Use a hair dryer. If you have any questions about these techniques, just let me know in the comments. It should be dry enough now for the process. So now I've painted this really weird color because I was talking and not paying attention. And I'm going to take a dry rag for this one. And I put the petroleum jelly in the recesses here. And hopefully it's dry enough now. And you can see where the petroleum jelly is, I hope you can see. It's wiping back. Yeah, there you go. That's a better one. So I'm just distressing where I put that petroleum jelly. Now I did kind of a hot mess here because I'm in a hurry. I don't want to keep you all night. But yeah, just wherever you put the petroleum jelly is where it's going to resist the paint and be distressed. Now you can do this as intricate as you want. I'm just kind of showing bigger ones so that you can get the idea of how it works. But it's really cool. I like that one because it's not real obvious. Now my paint's a little bit wet. There you go. So if you want to just, and you can make it as intricate, if the least amount of petroleum jelly you put in there, it would leave a smaller space. But overall, actually I like this one better. That's my favorite one. So overall, that's pretty much it. It's really simple. So you can use a sandpaper method to distress. You can use the candle to distress, or you can use petroleum jelly, or simply, and when I do this on furniture with a rag, it's super wet rag. It's not dry. It's almost soppy wet. And you want to make sure the paint is dry to the touch, but not so dry that you have to really work on it. And that's pretty much all it is. It's fun if you can get something, you know, plain like this to looking just kind of cute for a fall decor item. But you can, and like I said, you can make these distresses as intricate or as big blobby. You can make them really blobby like that, which I didn't really like. I was just playing around testing. These are actually some good examples of the, this was the wax method I used with the candle. This was the, it's upside down. This was the petroleum jelly. And this was with the wet rag. I think I prefer the wet rag the best because, you know, I only have to have one thing. So if you guys have any questions, just let me know and just pop them in the comments. I really appreciate you hanging out with me this weekend. Bye.